Yo, what's going on, guys? Jay here, and today I got the Magic 3 review for you guys. I know I just dropped the Magic 2 review probably less than a month ago. Oh well, Nas dropped the projects a couple months apart, so we're doing the same thing. If you guys don't already know, Nas, one of my favorite rappers ever. I think he's the best rapper ever. Right now, we get the Nas Wu-Tang Clan New York State of Mind tour shirt on right now. Whew. What an amazing experience that concert was. I went last year. Quick sidebar, just to see Nas, Busta Rhymes, and pretty much the entirety of the Wu-Tang Clan, RZA, Meth, Ray, Ghostface, all that, Inspector Deck, of course, too, all performing. It was an incredible experience. Aside from that, like I said, we did the Magic 2 review recently. I'm not going to give you a whole rundown. This is the sixth Nas album we've gotten in the 2020s. Nas, one of my favorite rappers, the best rapper of all time. You know what you're in store for. Real quick, I will say though, Magic 2, in my review, I did give that a 7.5 out of 10. Since scoring at that, it has dropped to a 7.2 in my opinion. Just giving that for preface, because it's another Nas album. The first three tracks, Fever, Tisk, and Superhero Status, are all pretty textbook Nas and Hit Boy at this point. From the fast-paced boom bap instrumental that builds throughout the song with the bridges for the chorus, as well as Nas's aggressive rapping and big flexes. This is most watered down and the most these are some real B-sides cuts, if you ask me. We're going into this tape, these first couple tracks, it did have me worried that we were going to be in store for a real B-sides tape, as if Magic and Magic 2 weren't already clearly B-sides tapes. This one, off rip, is feeling like it could be. Although a track like Superhero Status does have some great lyrics, and it does center this concept, not necessarily concept, but more so idea of Nas ascending the rap game and ascending a legend and becoming a superhero, wanting to be looked at as a role model to the youth and all this. And through that, we do get great bars in the chorus, like ability to leap buildings, if you blink you won't catch it. Moving on to a track like I Love This Feeling, it has this beautiful minimalist instrumental, and Nas is rapping fine as well too, but more than anything, this track just calls attention to the redundancy of some of the content matter at this point in Nas's run, because like I said, the King's Disease and Magic trilogy both do contain a lot of very similar content matter, like I detailed in the Magic 2 review with that King's Disease talk, that Nas mindset more or less. He's just trying to put you onto the game that he's learned with age. And a track, again, like I Love This Feeling, all it does is make me think about how many other songs I've heard in the 2020s about Nas loving being where he's at in his life, in the rap game, his legacy, all that. It's a good song. There are just better versions of this song from Nas to come out in this decade that I would rather listen to. I will say though, as much as the content matter is wearing down on me, as much as I'm starting to not enjoy it, it is still Nas, who again, just for the third or fourth time, the best rapper of all time, and Hit Boy, who is one of the best producers in the game right now and has seriously elevated Nas on this run. And just real quick, Hit Boy has had also a pretty great run through the 2020s with his album Surf or Drown. You gotta look at he executive produced Detroit 2 by Big Sean, but more importantly, he executive produced Burden of Proof by Benny the Butcher in 2020. So Hit Boy's been doing a lot of leveling up throughout the years. And so for that reason, it will always be quality when these two link, despite the redundancy, the repetitiveness, and just the fatigue at this point. Again, 6 albums in 3 years is a lot, but it's still quality. I just wanted to, lay that out before I continue to ream into this album for now. No Tears is one of the few major highlights in this first half of the track list, where we get this pretty skeletal instrumental with a nice drum pattern, as well as some haunting vocal samples that are woven into the beat and build and progress with the song. We also get some nice emotionally powerful synths as Nas raps the chorus of this track. And this is really a big mindset type track for Nas, where we see him confronting some of his old fears, some worries he had in his youth, some anxieties, his fears of making it, being arrested, losing his friends and family members, and all this stuff he was worried about on the come up. We see him addressing these things with the later outcomes and solutions being like, oh, you were worried about this, but now you're here. And it's more or less just Nas on the track saying, everything happened how it was supposed to. He is at where he's supposed to be. Honestly, with this album, not a major flaw, because I don't think this is a bad produced album, but I think this does have some of Hit Boy's weakest instrumentals throughout this run so far. They're not necessarily like bad or garbage. A lot of them just sound super similar. And again, it's that fatigue at this point. But a good example of this is a track like Never Die, which there is a degree that I like and enjoy this track too. Just the novelty of it being Nas and Lil Wayne, two of the best rappers and lyricists of all time. But this Hit Boy beat is pretty much a fumble. It's not anything super interesting. And honestly, Nas's performance is fine on here. It's not anything remarkable. Wayne's verse itself is pretty fucking great. And then, but it just doesn't fit the beat. Like, this instrumental was not, like, I don't know. It really feels like Wayne just sent in the vocals and didn't listen to the beat and just threw it over. Because, again, it's not a bad Wayne performance. It's what you'd expect at this point. But it just doesn't sound right. I enjoy the verse. I enjoy his rapping. Doesn't really fit the beat. Shout out to that feature he did with Tyga recently, though. Got that big bag full of zeros. We talking Funyuns. What a bar. Another pretty low moment for this album is Pretty Young Girl, which, I mean, I don't even know where to start on this. This track has been critically panned across the internet. Fantano's talked this shit about it. NFR's talked their shit about it. I've seen everyone online saying what they gotta say. So I'll keep it a little brief in that sense. But this is just a weird moment for the album. This track, on the surface, is a solid storytelling cut where we see Nas, following, trying to connect with this pretty young girl he meets at the club. He thinks they have some type of special connection. He's trying to seek her out again and build on that. Since he's younger, he wants to put her onto Biggie and see if, she's real like that. But even aside from that, right, the storytelling and lyrics are a little weird. But for this track where we see Nas, trying to find this young love, we get this really fast-paced instrumental which has these horns that are just so off-putting and abrasive. They feel like they're in contrast with Nas's voice every time he raps, and it just doesn't sound good. Nas as well is rapping aggressive as hell, and just the vibe and intensity of the track does not match the already out there lyrical content, and it's just not a good mix of things. This is definitely a low point for the album. On the chorus even, you got Nas, literally part of the chorus, long braids, brown eyes, 135, she like 5'5", Nas, I know you've been in the game a minute, but that is not a chorus. You are reading off the patient checking into information at a doctor's office like you a nurse practitioner or something. That's literally, bro just described her on the chorus, and that on its own is already shitty. But the fact that it's Nas and that's Pretty Young Girls is just a miss, guys. This track is not good. So I've been pretty harsh on this album so far, right? A lot of weak moments here. Pretty boring, pretty disappointing. Just feels like a lot of B-sides at this point. With that being said, Nas B-sides are still 7 out of 10 songs. So it's not a bad album at this point. It is just not that great. It's disappointing. And most importantly, unnecessary. Up until this point in the album, it feels unnecessary. But the 5-track run at the end of this album that I'm about to talk about, which kicks off with Blue Bentley, which is a fitting sequel, at least in my mind, to Blue Benz off of the first King's Disease, one of my favorite tracks from that record. And I mean, yeah, this is just another super fun track where we see Nas telling all these different stories about him and different women riding around in the Blue Bentley, different type of stuff he's getting into. And there's honestly, the bass on that track is loud, heavier than any Nas track ever before. And it's an interesting vibe at first, but I thought it was a super fun track. And again, it's kicking off what is the by far best stretch of this album, which brings us right into the next track, Jodeci Member, which I have in my notes written in all caps across a page. Best song here. And there's no doubt about that. We'll talk about some other contending tracks later, but Jodeci Member. Let me tell you all about Jodeci Member real quick, guys. First of all, not just the best song on this album, one of the best songs from this entire run that Nas has been on. And Hit Boy gives us this super pleasant, upbeat, and boastful, but also high-tempo instrumental boom bap, of course. This is like a vintage Nas track right here in that aspect. And Hit gives us this absolutely stunning vocal sample right at the bridge of the song where the beat stops for a second and we get this elegant sample hitting fully, and it just gives this whole track a super polished and finished feeling. As for Nas's portion of the song, he is giving one of the best rapping performances. Actually, he is giving the best rapping performance on this album, guys. He matches the pace of the beat perfectly and has never sounded smoother before, to be honest. Again, this is like a KD2, KD3 level Nas track right here. This is some excellence. And on Jodeci, remember, we do see Nas recounting his journey to the top, his journey to the luxurious, lavish life he lives now, as well as providing some great left field flexes as Nas does. Moving on to Japanese Soul Bar, which from what I've seen online is the most popular track, or what other people think is the best track on this album. I personally disagree, although I do absolutely adore the sample in here. Again, Hit Boy throughout this album, yes, like some of these beats are bland as fuck, boring, whatever, but there are some samples on here that, ooh, god damn. Hit was in his bag with some of these sample flips, guys. I would say Japanese Soul Bar is the best sample flip, if not Jodeci member. This is one of those style tracks that we've seen throughout the KD and Magic trilogies where it's mainly a sample-based instrumental where you get a more meditative, retrospective Nas. Other tracks in this vein that come to mind are Bokeem Woodbine off of Magic 2, and my preferred style of this track from the Magic series being Woo for the Children off of the first Magic. Japanese Soul Bar is another great addition into this style Nas uses throughout this run. And again, the lyrics here are great as you'd expect. Speechless 2, second to last track on the album, another incredible rapping performance from Nas, super upbeat, super fun. But guys, let's talk about the outro, 1-800 Nas and Hit, because I have a lot to say about this outro, about how, like, man, 1-800 Nas and Hit is not just a beautiful, poetic, and fitting closing track to Magic 3. It is a beautiful outro to this whole 2020's run with Hit Boy that I've been talking about throughout this album. That's why I've been referencing it, because this is, of course, the closing to it. 1-800 Nas and Hit is a track that reveals Nas and Hit will be going their separate ways for a while. This track's existence itself is one of the most poetic moments in hip-hop history, where you go back to 2020, King's Disease drops. It's kind of underwhelming, but it gets a Grammy nod. And no one thinks too much of it, you know? Everyone's like, oh, Nas is back. Great album. Did it deserve the Grammy nod? I think it's fair, but not his best album ever. But then, 2021 comes, King's Disease 2 drops, which was a huge album of the year contender from that year for me, as well as Magic, the first one, to drop after that. We got King's Disease 3 at the end of last year as well, and Magic 2 and 3 this year, of course. So first of all, this outro just wrapped up everything I just said, but then what this run means for me, King's Disease 2, album of the year contender, whatever, that was the album that made me fall in love with Nas. That was the album where I went back and not just started listening to at that point, I've been heard Illmatic, It Was Written, and they were albums I respected and I thought were great, but they were not albums that I loved. And I went back, and this is really for me where I grew my love for 90s hip-hop because of this Nas run. He made me go back and listen to him and to Jay, to Ghostface Killah, to AZ. A little New York bias there, of course, but this whole run has been pretty pivotal for me with my listenership to hip-hop, from me with my... Again, Nas is one of my favorite artists. It's because of this run. Anyways, this track kicks off. Let's talk about the music for a little bit now. It kicks off and we get Nas comparing him and Hit Boy's 6-album run to a box set of Star Wars DVDs or a greatest hit collection. And I just love that offer because it is. This is a box set of some classic albums, a classic time. And yeah, I love the catchy chorus here, and it's really just a beautiful full circle moment to see Nas and Hit both taking a victory lap, collecting their flowers as they should. We don't see Hit Boy rap on this album at all, but with the work he put in on this instrumental, you could tell this was his little final goodbye, just like Nas's rapping is, and he is collecting the flowers for both of them. Nas is just reminiscing on the journey, on the musical journey this run has been, and where he's at now. Not too much of what's next, but We know it's not going to be King's disease, as he says he killed that King's disease. This is a obviously Hit Boy behind the boards. He did make this a super emotional instrumental, one that pulls at your heartstrings a little bit. For me, the first time I heard it, and every time I listen to 1-800 Nas and Hit, this is like an emotional track for me, because this is, this is the end of the line. This is the final scenes of what has been a great movie that Nas and Hit have been taking us through these years. It is legitimately the most perfect, one of the most perfect and poetic outro songs in hip hop history. Yeah, there are better songs for sure, but in terms of a credits roll type of outro, this is the best. This beats out Last Call for me and any other rapper who dropped a 12-minute outro. This is 4.5 minutes. Nas and Hit, or Nas is still doing his shout outs at the end, and he also gives a great rap track before that, and even with the shout outs. I mean, there are so many great little moments here where you see, Nas is talking about how him and Hit Boy hit up the engineer, and his engineer's like, there's no way you guys are doing it again, that's crazy, joking about the engineer being annoyed by how often he's making them work. You even see Nas talking about how when him and Hit Boy would be recording and making music together, C3, Hit Boy's son, would be posted up in the studio with them playing games, watching cartoons. I also thought that was a super cool little tidbit that Nas dropped, letting you know that this whole studio sessions they've been doing has been a super personal thing to them. But I mean, yeah, I'll stop there. I could talk about 1-800 Nas and Hit all day, but as for Magic 3 as a whole, outside of that last 5-track run that I just detailed, there's not much worth revisiting. There's a couple tracks that I might hit, like No Tears or Never Die, if I want the novelty of just hearing that link up. A lot of this album does feel a little bit unnecessary. I feel like Magic 2 and Magic 3 could have been linked up into one album to make a super great outro to it, but it's fine. It's besides the point, because like I said, we got a beautiful closing to this album. Pretty mixed bag, forgettable, redundant, repetitive, but not bad and not even good. Mostly great. It's just greatness we've heard before. And before I rate this album real quick, just thank you to Nas, thank you to Hit Boy for what has been, again, a truly legendary moment in hip-hop history to watch. I mean, I feel privileged as a hip-hop fan getting to see this unfold. Magic 3 coming in at a 7.6 out of 10. Definitely not the highest rated album in this run, but again, that closing, man, it was all we really needed. Yeah, but that's all I got for you guys today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that bullshit. Go tell a friend, and I'll catch you in the next one, guys. Appreciate y'all. Peace.